I've been driving for as long as I can remember. Not professionally, but I've always believed there's nothing that grounds you more than an empty road and the steady hum of an engine. In the fall of 2021, worn out from the repetition of daily life, I decided to take a trip completely alone, no set destination, intentionally avoiding highways and anything that smelled like tourism. Just me, my aging car, some snacks, a fully charged phone, and a playlist of podcasts I'd been meaning to catch up on for weeks. The plan was simple: unwind, stop at forgotten roadside diners, and find those quiet views you never see on Instagram. I picked a series of rural back roads, leaving from Lubbock and heading north, passing through towns so small and quiet you'd wonder if anyone still lived there. That day, the sun was warm, the sky clear, and the roads practically deserted. Everything was going perfectly, until it wasn't. Somewhere between a town called Miller's Hollow and a stretch of road so remote it didn't even have a name on Google Maps, my engine started making a sound I'd never heard before. It wasn't knocking or the usual squeak of low oil. It was deeper, like something inside was struggling to break free. Instinctively, I slowed down and pulled over. There wasn't a soul in sight, just dry brush, the buzz of insects, and a heat that felt like it was drilling straight into my skull. I got out, popped the hood, and did what any amateur would do, stared at it like the answer might be scribbled on some random part. After a few minutes sweating and pretending to inspect something I didn't really understand, I realized two things. My phone had no signal, and the noise had stopped completely. What was left behind was an unsettling stillness. I sat on the edge of the driver's seat, my back soaked with sweat, nerves beginning to hum under my skin. I was debating whether to close the hood and just hope for the best when, off in the distance, I saw an old vehicle rolling slowly toward me. It stopped behind mine. Spray-painted in faded letters on the door were the words, "Ernie's Garage." That was when everything started to shift. And if you enjoy stories like this, make sure to subscribe, turn on notifications, and let me know in the comments the most disturbing experience you've ever had. Trust me, what comes next isn't for the faint of heart. The vehicle that pulled up looked like it belonged in another decade. The paint was dull, the windshield had a huge crack on the driver's side, and the engine sounded like it was barely staying alive. The man who stepped out was tall and lean, his skin weathered from the sun and time. He wore a grease-stained coverall and a faded cap that might have once been blue. He walked slowly, like there was no such thing as urgency, and when he got close enough, I noticed something strange in his smile. It felt calculated, not warm. "Car trouble?" he rasped. I nodded, explaining that something had started sounding off, maybe a belt issue. But I had no way to know for sure without signal or tools. He introduced himself as Ernie, said his shop wasn't far, and he could tow my car with no problem. He gestured toward a gravel path that wound through the trees off the roadside, promising it'd only take a few minutes. There was a moment of silence. I hesitated. There were no other cars for miles, no stores, no light poles. Everything told me to say no, but the alternative was standing there in the sun, hoping another stranger would come by, and who's to say that next one would be any better? I agreed. Ernie opened the back of his vehicle and pulled out a makeshift tow rig. Without saying much, he began hooking up my car with a mechanical sort of precision. When he was done, he motioned for me to ride with him, but I asked to stay in my own car, even if I'd be towed behind. He nodded, didn't push it. The road we took wasn't listed on any map. Narrow, with loose stones and dry branches snapping under the tires, trees pressed in from both sides, barely letting sunlight through. I didn't see houses, fences, animals. Nothing. After about 10 minutes of slow driving, the path opened into a clearing where a single metal structure stood. Ernie called it his garage. The building looked like an abandoned shed that had been taken over and reused 100 times. The main door was rusted through, and above it, a broken sign still barely read, Ernie's garage. Off to the side was a small booth that seemed to act as an office, with a cardboard-covered window and a cracked chair in front. Ernie unhooked my car with the same eerie calmness and pointed toward the booth with a jerk of his chin. "Head into the office. There's AC. I'll check the engine." And just like that, he disappeared behind the garage, his footsteps crunching faintly on the gravel. The office was a tiny annex built onto the side of the shed, barely separated by a cinder block wall. The door groaned as I pushed it open, and immediately I noticed the contrast. It was cooler inside, sure, but the air was thick, reeking of old oil and damp rot. There was a wooden table with a stack of magazines, all coated in dust and dated March 2019. Every single one. No newer issues, as if they'd all been placed there deliberately at the same time. Plastic chairs, mismatched. One had a broken leg patched up with duct tape. A cheap wall clock hung crooked above them, frozen at exactly 3:12. I checked my phone, 4:37. On the ceiling, a fan spun lazily, barely moving the air. The silence was the worst part. No clanking tools, no engine sounds, no radio, just the flickering buzz of a fluorescent light overhead. I stood there for a bit, watching the door Ernie had vanished through. Minutes passed, then I sat. My phone still had no signal. I thought about stepping outside to find better reception, but when I tried the door, it wouldn't budge. I twisted the handle hard, again and again. Nothing. It wasn't locked from the inside. It was worse. Jammed from the outside. I looked to the window, but it was sealed with a grimy tarp stapled tight. No way to see out, not even a crack. I stood still, trying not to jump to conclusions, but every second inside that office tightened the feeling in my chest. The furniture layout, the oddly clean patches, the smell, it all felt staged. This wasn't a neglected office. It was a set, like someone had tried to make it look lived in without actually living in it. I got up and began inspecting things more closely. There were framed certificates on the wall, all under the name Ernest Aguilar C., but the dates didn't make sense. A basic mechanic course from 2004, a customer service seminar in 2015, and another from 1991, all with identical signatures. The handwriting was the same, but that timeline didn't add up. As I stepped toward a shelf full of air filters and belts, I noticed something odd on the wall behind it. A faint outline, a line that looked like a door frame. Not an obvious doorway, but something told me it wasn't just storage. And just then, I heard it, a sharp metallic thud from deep inside the garage. It was brief, like a hammer hitting sheet metal. Then silence. That same designed silence meant to make your skin crawl. I froze, eyes locked on that shelf that now looked like a disguise. I gritted my teeth, stepped forward, and began pushing. It wasn't heavy, but it screeched with each inch it moved. Behind it, just as I suspected, was a hidden door, painted the same color as the wall with no knob, just a rusty bolt lock. I slowly slid it open, every sound amplified by my heartbeat, half of me screaming to turn back. But the other half, the trapped half, forced me forward. Beyond it, a narrow, pitch-black hallway. The air smelled like moldy rags, the kind that hadn't been touched in years. I moved slowly, guided only by a sliver of light breaking through a crack in the ceiling. The hallway led to the back of the garage, where the ground was patchy with high grass and stained with old oil. There was my car, just as I had left it, doors shut, completely untouched, and that's exactly what unsettled me even more. Ernie had said he'd check the engine, that it might take a while, but there was no sign that he'd ever opened the hood. No tools nearby, no parts removed. It was as if he hadn't touched the car at all. I looked around. No one, not a single soul. I stepped closer, pulled my phone out of my pocket, even though I still had no signal, and snapped a quick photo of Ernie's trailer license plate. I thought about getting in the car, starting it, and just driving away. But then, behind me, I heard footsteps. I turned fast. Ernie was walking out of the garage, wiping his hands on a grimy rag. He was smiling, but that smile, it wasn't friendly anymore. "All set," he said, like he'd been working in total silence. "Just a loose piece, nothing major." I nodded, unsure what to say. He held out the keys, and I took them without making eye contact. "If you want, I can double-check everything before you go," he offered. "No, it's fine, really. Thanks." My voice came out dry, almost foreign. Ernie shrugged and started walking toward the front of the garage. I stood there a moment, frozen in place, feeling like moving too quickly might trigger something worse. I got into the car, locked the doors, and sat there with my hands on the steering wheel, trying to breathe steadily. Then I saw him. In the rearview mirror, Ernie stood in front of the garage, staring at me. He didn't move, just watched, like he was waiting for something else. For several seconds, I sat there, keys in hand, eyes locked on the mirror, but he was no longer there. The silence outside was complete. Only the faint creaking of the metal building, like the garage itself was breathing. I took a deep breath and turned the key. The engine started right up, but the sound felt different, rougher, more pronounced. It wasn't the same noise from earlier, but it wasn't comforting either. It was like the car also wanted out. I didn't wait. Shifted into gear, eased out of the clearing, and rolled back onto the narrow gravel path. Even though I was the one driving, I kept feeling like something would jump out and block my way. Every turn was tighter, every tree closer. I had to brake several times to avoid branches that reached out like fingers toward the car. It took longer than I remembered to get back to the main road. When I finally saw pavement again, it felt like a weight lifted off my chest. But as soon as I sped up, another kind of dread crept in. Why had that place made me feel so trapped? I drove for almost an hour with no real direction, just getting as far away as I could. I stopped at a gas station on the outskirts of a town near Oak Ridge, bought a bottle of water, and sat in the car with the engine off, trying to process everything. That's when, opening the trunk to check if everything was in place, I noticed something under the mat. It wasn't immediately visible, but a small corner of laminated paper stuck out near the edge. I pulled it out carefully. It was a small card about the size of an ID. No logos, no address, just a handwritten phrase in red ink. "Next time, don't run." I stared at those words for a long time. There was no way to know when it had been placed there. It could have been while I was in the office, or even earlier. What if the entire thing had been orchestrated from the start? That message wasn't some impulsive threat. It was deliberate, personal, and above all, cold. I closed the trunk and got back in the car, my pulse racing. Everything took on a new light now. The silent office, the magazines, the frozen clock, the hidden door. None of it was coincidence. Ernie had let me go, sure, but not without making sure I knew I hadn't fooled him. I couldn't sleep that night. Even back at home, with the doors locked and every light on, the image of that card haunted me every time I closed my eyes. "Next time, don't run." It wasn't just a warning. It was a declaration of control, like he was telling me he knew exactly what he was doing and had chosen to let me go. I tried to brush it off. I thought about calling the local police in Oak Ridge, but what would I say? That a mechanic towed me and didn't technically do anything illegal? That I found a creepy handwritten card with no fingerprints and no witnesses? I already knew what they'd say. No evidence, no crime. So I did what most people do when they don't know who to turn to. I posted about it on a driver's forum under a fake name. I told everything, in full detail, no exaggerations. Within 24 hours, responses started rolling in. Most were standard, skepticism, curiosity, a few jokes. But one reply froze me in place. An anonymous user said, "Did he let you go with a card too? I found one in my engine compartment. It said, 'I was watching you. Garage near Lakeview.'" Ernie, right? My stomach turned to knots. I messaged him right away asking for more info, but he never responded. I checked his profile, created that same day, no other posts, and deleted shortly after. That's when I knew What happened to me wasn't an isolated incident. This guy had done it before, and he would do it again. I combed through my car all over again, opened every compartment, unscrewed panels beneath the dashboard, even took apart the rear door linings. I found nothing, but the fact that I felt the need to do that made it clear how deeply this had shaken me. This wasn't how someone reacts to a scare. This was paranoia, raw distrust. Over the following days, I started developing odd habits, always parking under lights, avoiding deserted routes, and sending my live location to someone every time I drove alone, even if I didn't plan to talk to them. I couldn't clearly explain what that man had done to me. He didn't hurt me, didn't rob me, didn't lay a hand on me, but he broke something inside me. He made me feel like prey, marked but spared, like I'd been silently evaluated and didn't qualify for whatever came next. A week after that post, I couldn't stop thinking about the anonymous comment, the deleted profile, the name, Ernie. It was all too specific to ignore. I started digging through old forums, archived threads buried beyond common search engines. I spent whole nights reading stories, some bizarre, others incoherent, but now and then certain patterns made my skin crawl. One person talked about a makeshift garage between Maple Hollow and an empty stretch of highway where an older man offered help without being asked. Another described a place not on any map where they were held for safety reasons for hours. Names changed, details shifted, but the structure, it mirrored mine. I went back to the forum where I'd posted my story. The entire thread was gone, no explanation, like someone had wiped it clean. Then I remembered something almost forgotten. The time I found the card, it was right after I'd stopped for gas in Oak Ridge. I thought of checking the station's security cameras, but hit another dead end. I went there in person, asked about the footage. The clerk, a disinterested kid, told me they only kept recordings for 48 hours. After that, everything got overwritten. Nothing left. Another dead end. But just when I was ready to let it go, I stumbled on a blog post late one night. No comments, no shares. It was dated April 2017. It read, "Sometimes danger doesn't shout or attack. Sometimes it offers help quietly. It studies you, and if you don't fit into its game, it lets you go. But if you do, there's no way back." There were no names. Just one image, a blurry photo of a rusted metal door with faded letters spelling Garage E, the structure, identical to the one I'd been taken to. I screenshotted it, saved the file, and shut off my computer. Then I sat in the dark of my living room for over an hour, motionless. For the first time, I realized I might never know how many others went through this, how many never made it out, and worst of all, how many more would, without anyone ever doing a thing. Because if I, with details and proof, couldn't get anyone to care, what chance did anyone else have? Months passed. I tried to return to normal, but everything I did seemed filtered through that experience. Every road I took, every gas station stop, every stranger I passed on the highway, all felt like part of something hidden. I didn't talk about it, not with friends, not with family. What I'd been through was too strange to explain without getting those looks, half pity, half doubt. One day, while sorting through old files, I came across that screenshot from the blog. The garage photo. Something in me wouldn't let it go. Like that place had planted a thorn I couldn't pull out. And I made a decision I still don't know was brave or stupid. I went back, not to confront Ernie. I didn't even know if he'd still be there. I just wanted to understand if what I'd lived was part of something bigger or just a twisted one-off that fear had magnified. I needed closure. I planned it all. Took a small camera, a voice recorder, a portable GPS that didn't rely on cell signal. I told a friend I was going on a trip, gave him the last known coordinates. I left at dawn, in the same car as before, this time with a tracking system installed. I took the same roads, the same rural turns, and eventually found the same gravel path. But something was different. Where there had once been dense trees and overgrown brush, Now there was cleared land and signs of heavy equipment. The road was partially blocked by a rusted gate and old private property signs. I slipped through on foot, gear on my back, recording everything. When I reached the clearing, I couldn't believe it. The garage was gone. Only cracked concrete remained, with burn marks and a few warped metal frames sticking out of the mud. The ground showed fresh tire tracks, like the place had been dismantled recently. Strangest of all, no trash, none of the usual debris from an abandoned site, no bottles, no paper, no tools. It was clean, too clean. I wandered the area, heart pounding, convinced something would burst out of the trees. But there was nothing, or so I thought. Just as I was about to leave, I noticed something gleaming beneath a flat stone. I crouched down and moved it aside. Beneath it was a small metal plate fastened into the ground. It was engraved with a number, 1358, and nothing else. That number made no immediate sense. 1358. I read it over and over, trying to make it fit somewhere. A date, a coordinate, a code. There was no context, no explanation. Just that metal fragment hidden under a rock in a place where nothing seemed accidental. I took a photo, slipped it into my backpack, and hurried away. On my way back to the car, I couldn't stop glancing over my shoulder. The place was empty, but it felt watched. That kind of feeling you can't prove, but can't ignore either. When I got home, the first thing I did was upload all my recordings to the cloud. I didn't want to risk losing anything. Then I sat at my computer and started searching. I ran the number through old forums, public databases, military archives, lists of decommissioned garages. Nothing, not a single match. But something made me revisit that old blog where I'd first seen the photo of the garage months before. It was still online, inactive for years, but intact. I went through every archived post until I found one from 2014, buried deep in the feed. It was brief, a fragmented story, written in a style that felt almost poetic. But at the end, in a lone paragraph, it read, "I was number 12, they let me go, I never spoke of it again." That's when I understood. 1358 wasn't a code, it was a count. I was number 13. And 58? 58 people marked, attempts, survivors, victims I didn't know. And worst of all, I had no way of knowing. In the days that followed, I barely slept. I kept jolting awake from dreams about doors that wouldn't open, cars trailing behind me, Ernie standing silently outside my window just watching. I started to believe that the real threat wasn't just him, or maybe not him alone. Maybe he was just part of something much bigger, a pattern, a list. And if I was number 13, how many before me had gotten out? How many hadn't? I went back to the laminated card I'd stashed away in a drawer with tape. The words were still there, unchanged. But something about them felt different now. "Next time, don't run." It didn't sound like a warning anymore. It sounded like a promise. It's been over 8 months since that day I returned to where it all began. Since then, there have been no calls, no messages, no clear sign that I'm being followed. But calm doesn't equal safety. On the contrary, the absence of anything is what scares me most. Because I've come to realize that what I experienced wasn't random. It wasn't just that my car broke down and someone showed up. It was a process, a test. And though I left that place under my own power, I've never been sure if it's because I failed or because I didn't qualify. Life moved on, sure. Work, bills, routines. But it's all covered in a film now. Like everything I do is shaded by the memory of that garage, that man, that hidden door, and that plastic card. 2 weeks ago, while cleaning out my glove compartment, a meaningless task once, I found something else. A sheet of paper, folded into quarters, tucked between old manuals and insurance forms. I thought it was junk. But when I opened it, I saw a list of names. At first, I didn't understand. They were ordinary names, some with initials, others fully written. Next to each, a date. Some had a red mark, Others were crossed out in black. And there, halfway down the list, was my name. No date, no mark, just my name. There was nothing else on the page, no title, no signature, no explanation. I put it back, not out of denial, but because I understood it wouldn't matter what I did next. I was already in, maybe watched, maybe just recorded. I don't know. But here's what I do know. Since that day, every time I drive down a quiet road or see a parked car with someone inside, I ask myself the same question. Is that another one like Ernie? Another mechanic? Another person just waiting for the right moment to step in? Now I see everything differently. And even though I've tried to leave that day behind, I can't trust what looks normal anymore, because I learned harshly that sometimes horror doesn't scream, it doesn't bleed, it doesn't chase you with chains or drag you through dark halls. Sometimes horror offers you a hand, smiles, and takes you somewhere no one will hear you. If you've stayed with me this far, thank you for hearing my story. And if someone ever offers to help you when you didn't ask, think twice, because not everyone who offers help is really trying to help. And if you're still here, don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell, and tell us in the comments, what's the most terrifying experience you've ever lived? Maybe you're not alone.